This podcast is brought to you by PwC.
Hi everyone, and welcome to another edition of Family Office Insights. Today I'm delighted to be joined by Chris Edward, who is a director for Lombard International Assurance covering the UK market. Thanks for joining us, Chris.
Hi, good morning, Lisa. Nice to be here.
Thank you. So can we start? Can you introduce yourself and the work you're doing with families and family offices?
Yeah, absolutely. So I'm a UK regulated advisor. We've been dealing, or myself personally, been dealing with UK resident clients for the past 24 years in the wealth planning space, predominantly using insurance-based structures, trust planning. But generally speaking, it's internationally mobile families living in the UK or with a UK link.
Yeah. I probably should have said from outset that nothing in this podcast should be considered to be advice,
Yep.
just to cover that one off. So as someone like myself who has quite a lot of UK connected clients and interested clients, we obviously had very big news just recently about the changes proposed to taxation of foreigners who come into the UK. What are you seeing in that space? What do you think?
Yeah,
about
I think we've probably been waiting for such a major announcement for the last probably eight to 10 years. The fears of a lot of my clients, particularly now, is looking at the existing structures they have. So, predominantly trust planning. Will those trusts be transparent going forward? That's one of the suggestions from the budget and from April 2025. If they are still non-domiciled, what should they be doing now and what should they be considering? Definitely from our perspective as an insurance company, a policy, acting as a blocker from a pure tax deferral perspective going forward, having the ability to access your capital on an ongoing basis is definitely going to be something that one should consider. And also with the potential changes, if one is, thinking about longer term stays in the UK, is inheritance tax and potentially putting those investments into a trust. Trusts are great from an IHT perspective. The problem is when you start investing and then you need to access your capital, accessing those funds in terms of distributions from the trust. You'd have an attribution again or a matching against income and gains. So actually having a combination of a trust structure with an underlying policy which gives the tax deferral and giving the ability to invest the funds, but at the same time pay out, as some of you may know on this podcast, these types of insurance policies allow you to take out 5% of what you've paid in on a cumulative basis going forward. So it allows you to get capital payments from the trust, but at the same time still being invested.
Yeah, and it's maybe actually worth zooming out a second. And when you talk about policy, can you just give us a kind of basic overview of what you mean by a policy? Yeah,
so these types of policies have been around. So it's a unit-linked insurance bond, offshore bond is sometimes the term that they use in the UK. They've been for the best part of 30, 40 years in the legislation. Nothing's pretty much changed in that sense. So if you have a client that makes an investment of, say, £1 million, from the moment that £1 million is inside the policy, you get tax deferral. So it's a pure deferral vehicle or mechanism. There's no reporting. It makes life very, very easy and simplistic from that perspective. And of that million, you can effectively withdraw 5% or 50,000 every year. If you don't use it, you don't lose it. So, if you don't touch the policy itself for, say, 3 years, you can take out 150,000, so 15% of what you paid in.
And these policies are pretty widely used generally across Europe as well, aren't they?
Absolutely. Again, one of the key features, particularly in our business, is portability. And, the majority of the business or the clients and families that we deal with in the UK are typically international. The majority are probably non-domiciled or at least not UK nationals, and potentially will move at some point in the future. And hence the fact that, they have something that works now in the UK, but if they move to France, Spain, Portugal, Italy, they have something that they can actually take with them, and there's no tax consequences or of that particular structure. Why? Because it's recognised in the country that they've moved to, particularly in the EU.
Yeah. And when it comes to the underlying investments that can be held within this type of policy, can you talk us through that?
Yeah, absolutely. One of the, and again, we play fairly safe on this. These types of policies are investment linked. So it needs to be liquid assets, liquid portfolios. Again, I had some discussions this week with clients with, I don't know, real estate portfolios.
Yeah.
Private assets and private companies. That is definitely not something that within the regulations that would be allowed. It'd be very, very risky to do that. But if it's pure investment portfolios or liquid assets, then it's not a problem.
Yeah. And a question we get asked a lot if we're talking about this type of policy is then where does the counterparty risk sit?
Again, good question. The way that we are set up, and again, we're Luxembourg-based, the protection regime that we have in place there, I think the regulator has been pretty pragmatic. So we have to have a custodian bank. So there is a bank underlying or where the investments are actually held. The agreement that we have is called the Triangle of Security. There's a tripartite agreement between the bank, the government regulator in Luxembourg, and Lombard International. What does that mean? So you've got sort of, I suppose, two counterparty risks. One, what happens, if something happens to the bank, and then the second one is the insurance company. So with the insurance company, effectively, those investments that are held on that policy account are ring-fenced and segregated for the benefit of that policyholder.
Yeah.
So they're not shareholder assets of the business. So again, if something happens to the insurance company, and this is just generally in Luxembourg, there's no counterparty risk for the end client on their particular portfolio or the portfolio that's linked to their policy. Similar to the bank system, we had in, I think it was 2007 or 8, there was issues with some of the Icelandic banks.
Yeah.
Kaupting, Glitner, and Landesbanki were the three that we had accounts with. The regulator actually stepped in and moved those accounts within 4 to 6 weeks.
Right, okay.
Bizarrely enough, our clients actually got 100% of the cash out, so it wasn't just the 100,000 or compensation scheme. If you had a personal account, you actually had to do a class action with all the other account holders, and I believe that took sort of 4 to 5 years to get your cash back and your assets out. So again, having an EU government regulator involved in this protection regime, I think, is very key, and just peace of mind actually for end clients, particularly when our average client is probably 5 to 10 million euros in terms of investments. They don't necessarily know us; they'll know the bank.
Yeah.
But it gives them again peace of mind that that they're not on someone's balance sheet and risking an insurance company going into administration.
Yeah. And you work with a wide range of banks, right?
Yeah, I mean, we currently, I think we have about 195 banks in Europe and about 2,000 investment managers.
Okay, that's
so
a lot.
Various jurisdictions, but again, I'm looking at UK based, Luxembourg, Switzerland, Monaco are typically the 4 jurisdictions that at least the families that I deal with would be banking with. And again, we would plug in from those banks an investment manager or a family office if they have the ability to invest or to manage money into those accounts as well. So again, double security. We have, it doesn't need to be in all instances the bank as a custodian that's actually managing the money as well. So we have a bit of flexibility there.
Yeah. And I think for us, the clients we talk to, it doesn't fit for every client, but for clients who are looking for a way of, they don't need the income, they want to be invested, they are likely to move between countries, it works quite well. Very well, I think.
Yeah, I mean, look, we sort of stay in this realm of the sort of 5% allowance, and if a client comes and says, well, look, this is great, but I need the money in 2 years, and to be quite honest, it's going to be a waste of everyone's time. You defer the tax and you pay the tax in 2 years. These are predominantly long-term generational planning type structures. To be quite frank. We do see, if a client doesn't need access, so typically what we'd say is, don't touch the investments for the first 2 to 3 years. Keep cash on the side, for your spending requirements, and let the money grow.
Yeah.
And at the same time, you're also accumulating this allowance where you can actually draw down on the funds. Interestingly, through what we have seen, unfortunately, in the last 2 years with interest rates going up, people were actually borrowing against these policies. So you can use that as collateral. So effectively, if you've got, again, policy £10 million, you need short-term liquidity to buy a house or to make an investment, you can use that policy as an asset, as collateral for a loan.
Yeah.
Again, rates were, a lot lot leaner, let's just say in the Euroland, 2-3 years ago, 4 or 5% is not as attractive now, but you still have clients that want to do that. But at least you have that facility. So rather than taking out more than your accumulated 5% and creating potentially a tax charge, you borrow against the policy and then you pay off that loan, over 2 or 3 years.
And not everyone does, but I used to work for a bank before I was with PwC. And one of the things that we used to model for clients with this type of policy was actually the impact of gross roll-up, so not having to pay ongoing taxes. And it really does make a big difference to the investment performance over time. Yeah,
look, I mean, if I've particularly in the last 12 to 18 months, I mean, I've got some clients that are sort of up 20-25%, and that money being taxed in a personal capacity and not being reinvested. So the compounding effect on the investments can be quite key. There's no exit tax in the UK if you do leave. So again, a lot of my clients, particularly at the moment, where with these changes, it's a drastic measure. Oh, I need to leave. Well, actually, if you plan properly, you don't need to leave. Again, I'll give you an example. One of my clients I spoke to on Monday in London, he's got a 14-year-old son, and he does not want to put his son into a boarding school. He does not want to leave. Don't take his son out of the UK, his school that he's currently in.
Yeah. So if we look into your crystal ball, I think I know the answer to this, but given the changes coming up in the UK, do you expect to have a busy year ahead?
It's busy already. I mean, I must admit, it's and again, this is existing clients sort of looking at their other structures that they don't necessarily have with myself. People are now starting to think, well, okay, there's going to be an election this year, so it's not 100% this is going to come into legislation in April, 2025. The general feeling is that, well, Labour have been given effectively a set of rules, and will it get better? Will they water down what the Tories have said? Probably not. Could they possibly delay it? I mean, I think, it was part of the Labour manifesto. Will it be too soon to put this into place? I mean, it's a massive change. I mean, we're talking about getting rid of effectively the definition of domicile in
which has been around for
hundreds of years. So and if you look at the legislation, this is a major change. I did hear that they've earmarked money and they've outsourced actually all of the legislation and the writing of that, which they didn't do in 2008 when they made the changes. So I think, again, they're pressing forward with this. So my view is it will not get better than what has been mentioned now. And also the one sort of commentary is about, bringing in mixed funds or tainted funds, paying a rate of 12%. Is that a reasonable amount? I mean, it sounds quite low in my view, and why not 20%? Bring it into line with CGT. So if you've got income offshore, it would seem that 12% seems quite sort of too good to be true. And again, if Labour then come into power, would they keep that rate? That's probably, in my view, a little bit low. On the other side, they want to entice people to bring money back. So we need to see, and there's also some uncertainties about the inheritance tax, this sort of 10-year period that they're mentioning as well, and potentially also catching people that have left the UK, because again, you've got a domicile, you lose your domicile 3-4 years of leaving. There's a potential IHT tail of 10 years now.
Yeah. So
how is that actually going to, and will that, how will that be treated with double taxation treaties with other countries as well? So I think that's also, it's not necessarily something that is impacting our business. But if you've got clients that have actually left in the last couple of years, there could be a sting in the tail on that front as well.
Yeah, and I think what we've been saying to clients at the moment is review your circumstances, make sure you understand what the impact of what's been proposed is, but we just don't have the legislation yet. But I think also the point that we would make is that the rules will come into effect as it stands April 25. Don't wait until March 25 to do something.
No, absolutely not. No, I mean, we have what we have. We need to find the details. I think someone was mentioning before the summer break, we should receive at least the nitty gritty, and then we can sort of plan for there. But, we have a roadmap. This is saying what they want to do. So let's, as a client, you should be taking advice on the basis of what we have. definitely don't wait until January, February next year, because if it does come into to force, you know, the trust industry, I'm sure, is going to be completely overwhelmed. You know, also on our side, completely overwhelmed. You know, opening new bank accounts is going to be very, very difficult. So again, I would, you know, plan now, and at least if you know what you're going to do, have a plan of action, plan of attack. You know what to do, and you could even set up shell structures effectively that you can just fund if these changes come into force. So not actually waiting until the end, because again, compliance nowadays and all the legals as well does take time. So I think, you know, if you're going to do something, then it's better to think about these things now rather than, you know, delay.
Yeah, and even though there might be some upfront compliance to navigate through, we do see that clients who have these, once they're set up, the reduced admin burden really is a benefit to them. It makes life less painful.
Well, yeah, I mean, on our side, I mean, it's sometimes the clients say, so this sounds too good to be true. So I put my money into a policy structure, or even with a trust, and it's maybe a single asset of a trust. There's no reporting. So you could have 1 million transactions underneath. You know, you could have 5 different investment managers, 5 different banks, you know, thousands of transactions, and actually, because it's within a policy, if you don't take out more than this 5% allowance, there's absolutely nothing to report, and you have one single asset. So it makes the reporting aspects of that a lot easier.
Yeah.
Interestingly enough, you know, we do a lot of clients planning, and it's not actually tax; it's more about administration.
Yeah.
I had a very successful businessman that we deal with, where his wife's an artist. She has no financial sort of background. He had accounts everywhere. I mean, literally everywhere. So we did a bit of consolidation on the account side. He's got one policy with 7 investment managers underneath. And the whole point is that they've got something that is jointly owned. He's older than her, around probably 10 years, 10, 12 years. And it's about succession. If something happens to him, the wife automatically becomes the sole owner of the policy.
Yeah.
She has one asset, one counterparty, so she can speak to us, and we then do all the consolidation with the banks. So again, and it's a pure administrative point.
Yeah.
Previously, all the accounts were in his name. Accounts would have been blocked. It would have been, you know, probate. It would have just been a mess, absolute mess. So again, this was the softer points that we deal with families. Is actually, it's just more the ease of succession and ease of administration rather than pure, you know, tax deferral. That just wasn't. That wasn't one of the main aspects or drivers for the planning that we put in place for this particular family.
Yeah, and I think they're softer points, but they're so important, and that's the driver for a lot of families to do these types of policies.
Yeah, absolutely. And you know, a lot of the clients, it's not necessarily it's generational planning. So it's not necessarily, again, thinking about now, but it's sort of, you know, how can I get the money or the assets to my children, my grandchildren in an effective manner? You know, for clients, particularly ones that are deemed domiciled or res and domiciled in the UK, we've been creating policies where similar, I suppose, like a trust in the sense that you can time when and control when the children actually get the money. So if you've got, I don't know, an 18 and a 20-year-old, you don't necessarily want to give them, you know, millions of pounds and have full access, right? That's definitely not the scenario, but we can create policies where they maybe get access at 25 or 30, and then they only get a certain percentage every year. So again, tied in with the 5% allowance, and then only at a certain age, so I don't know, 35 or 40, depending on how the conditions have been put in place, they can get full access.
Yeah.
So they think that they've got sufficient maturity to actually deal with those funds. Similarly, we had a family that I'm dealing with at the moment where, again, the children have no idea about money, investments. So we've set up sort of three smaller pots. And the manager of the investments is actually going to educate, so they can't access it until they're 25.
Yeah.
But the manager of the investments is actually going to teach them about investments. So they've got a program to inform the children about, you know, what's an equity, what's a bond, you know, how do portfolios work. So get them understanding about money and about wealth and about, you know, passing that on and how you generate that. It's going to be a lot easier than them just getting, you know, a lump of money, you know, on their lap and not knowing what to deal with or how to deal with that in a responsible manner.
Yeah, and I think that succession planning topic is definitely one that many families we work with will be dealing with over the next few years, because we know that within the next 10 years there'll be a huge shift of businesses and wealth from the current generation to their heirs.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think so. I mean, if you look at the UK, where and I've generally found that there's a lot of the old generation have not done gifting when they should have done. So you've got people in the 70s and 80s, and now their children are in their 50s and 60s, and they don't necessarily need that money. So we're doing a lot of generational skipping on predominantly on the basis that there's a 40% inheritance tax liability in the UK. So why would you then give it to your children who don't necessarily need the money, for them to then give it to their children? So you've got 7-year periods, potentially exempt transfer, and then a second potentially exempt transfer. So again, this generational skipping, again, you still have the 7-year period, but again, blocking the assets for a certain period of time, so that again, this control and access is taken care of. So
it can be managed.
It can be managed, exactly.
That's really interesting, Chris. So thank you for joining us, and we'll see you again soon.
Lovely to be here. Thanks very much, Lisa.
Thank you.
Take care.
Bye.